Hi guys, welcome to Twin Perspective. I'm Joe, and tonight I'm going to be talking about artists and albums. I like to know what the YouTube channels I follow. I like to know a little bit more about them. You know, I follow them, they become personalities, and I've been inspired by some of the other channels that I follow, doing little bits like this, telling me more about themselves. I find it interesting. Sometimes I don't agree with anything that they say, but it's interesting to me nonetheless. And I'm going to be laying out something about musicians for you guys, so you guys will know a little bit more about me and how I feel when it comes to artists and albums. Now, I love putting lists together, and I can usually have a top 5 or a top 10 list for just about anything. But for favorite album, you know, I can probably put a collection of 20 of them that are my favorites, but I don't know if I could have it a set order. But if I don't have a top 5 or top 10 list, I'll at least identify one thing, the number one thing, my favorite. If I can't come up with a top 10 list, at least I'll have a favorite. So for me, my favorite album is this one right here. It is Peter Gabriel's Passion, music for The Last Temptation of Christ, a film by Martin Scorsese. Peter Gabriel's Passion. Now, for those of you who follow this channel because of the Twin Peaks, David Lynch, or film videos, or maybe you follow because of the crazy independent thought political videos I have, you know that I'm an independent one way or the other. And this album's interesting. It's influenced by Middle Eastern and Northern African music, which happens to be the places where America's most involved militarily at the moment. But the music is heavily inspired by that area, and Peter Gabriel has a lot of the area's musicians playing on this album, and it is something to behold. I recommend it to anybody out there who likes something different. And I've loved music my whole life. I'm a musician myself. I play keyboards, I write lyrics, and I play a little bit guitar, and I've loved music and played music my whole life. I love a large spectrum of music, but typically I'm a 80s new wave kid. So when I say that Peter Gabriel's Passion is my all-time favorite album, it should say something to you, so go and check it out, see if you like it. Now, I do have a list of my favorite artists because I've always got a kick out of it. You know, lists are preferential, and, you know, they'll change as quick as the next boner comes, but but I like that. I like having a list, and I like seeing how, as albums come out by these artists, whether they knock them down the list or move some of them up. And right now, I'm pretty set on who I like. I usually have a top 10, but tonight I'm going to be presenting my favorite 16 favorite artists. I hope you guys enjoy this. I've made little visual aids because I don't have the albums to represent all of the artists, not the cases anyway. I have listed the artists, so this is a list of artists, my favorite artists, from 16 to 1. But underneath every artist, I list my favorite album by that artist. And I'm going to be talking about the albums because although I don't have a list of my favorite albums, concrete and set in stone, the ones that are going to be mentioned here are among my favorite albums. So, without further ado, Twin Perspective presents Artists and Albums. These are things, if you like me and what I do, and my brother, then perhaps you might want to look into this, and maybe we'll have the same opinion. So, number 16, Radiohead. How about that, Radiohead? I'm not such an 80s kid after all. These guys came out in the 90s. Radiohead's a great band. My favorite album is In Rainbows from 2007. Now, I'll tell you how I got involved with Radiohead. Of course, Creep was the big single. I remember seeing it on MTV and thinking to myself, you know, this is a really good song, but this is a one-hit wonder. I didn't expect anything else from them. And I quit watching MTV shortly after that. I was barely watching it to begin with. And Radiohead came out with some fabulous albums. The Bends was their second album that I recall. And don't remember hearing anything from that at that time in my life. So it wasn't until a coworker of mine lent me, oh shoot, I gotta think about it, hold on. OK Computer. Okay, God, I'm getting old. So this guy lent me OK Computer, and I went home and I listened to it, and I was shocked and not what I expected at all. And I ended up acquiring Pablo Honey and the Bends, and the Bends is one of my all-time favorite albums. A great album, quite possibly universally considered Radiohead's best album, but I thought they had some hits and misses. I'm not a fan of the off-timing, digitalized percussion sounding stuff, and I like when a band experiments, and so I appreciate Radiohead a lot for everything that they do. And to each their own. I like the albums in which they have a blend of stuff. So Hail to the Thief was really good for me. And that had a lot of experimental stuff too. But my favorite is In Rainbows. I have a deep connection with that album. They're hit and miss for me. Right after that, it was a miss, and then right after that, it was a hit again. You know, but In Rainbows right now, that's my favorite. Definitely one of my all-time favorite albums. So Radiohead's still going. So you know, they have a chance to move up or down. They've had enough albums now where they could be solidly in the top 5 if they were more consistent. All right, but I didn't have a top 15 list. Had to have a top 16 because I had to include Radiohead. I love them that much. All right, on to the next one. My 15th favorite artist. Jane says, I'm done with Sergio. He treats me like a ragdoll. Jane's Addiction. My favorite album by them, Nothing Shocking. The first album was good, Nothing Shocking. When it first came out, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I don't like heavy metal music. I don't typically like really heavy music. And the first time I heard Mountain Song, I just blew it off and thought, you know, it's just another heavy metal band. And then I heard a couple of the other tracks because friends of mine liked them, and they stood out to me. There was something different. This wasn't typical heavy metal. And Nothing Shocking, as much as I resisted it, became a ritual, which is funny because the next album, Ritual de lo Habitual, was amazing as well. Those two albums, Nothing Shocking and Ritual de lo Habitual, cemented Jane's Addiction into my top 10 all-time favorites. Now, I haven't loved everything that they've done, and they've slipped to number 15 on my current list. But nothing can take away what Nothing Shocking means to me and to my childhood. I had incredible experiences listening to that album, and it's not often that you can get a large group of people together and to be completely focused on this one venture, which was Nothing Shocking. I'm pretty shocked, actually, that we didn't get busted for noise complaints for a good year there. No matter what was going on in the house at the time, all you had to do was get up and walk around, go to each room, find everybody and what they were doing, and say, "It's time." And they look up and, "Oh, it's time. Okay." Whatever they were doing, they'd get up and walk away from it. Everyone would converge in front of the stereo, and Nothing Shocking would kick our ass. Love that album. A lot of religious moments with that album. Perry Farrell, the lead singer, is one of my favorite lyricists. And I love the production. So there you go, Jane's Addiction. Number 15 on my current list of favorite artists. Number 14. This might be a difficult one to swallow. Sting. That's right. The lead singer of the Police. Sting. I'm one of those rare individuals who likes Sting more than the Police. Now, when I was younger and the Police were around, the Police were great. They were one of the greatest at the time. They never had a single I didn't like. I actually loved most of them. And I never ran out and bought their albums or anything, so I wasn't a huge diehard fan. But Synchronicity 2 kicks on and you can't help but jam. So, and when Sting first came out, I accepted the first album, Dream of the Blue Turtles. But when Nothing Like the Sun came out, I was a little perturbed. I kind of wanted the Police back at that point. So I kind of discredited Sting for a little while there, even though there was a lot of gems that I couldn't help but like. But when Ten Sumner's Tales came out, that album to me went in another direction than what I thought Sting was going to do his whole career. It went in a direction of storytelling, and the songs were formed in a way that I much more agreed with than where I'd hoped he wasn't going to go and where I thought he was going to go. But anyway, that's all complicated. But if you like music and you're an artist, you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, I fell in love with that album, and I've come to love Nothing Like the Sun. Dream of the Blue Turtles is still really good for me. But it was later on when he did Mercury Falling, and then he ended up doing Brand New Day. Those two albums, and he's had some in between that I didn't care much for, but those two albums to me are really, 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 really good. And that cements him in my top 15. I can listen to Ten Sumner's Tale, Mercury Falling, and Brand New Day, and I think those three right there, that makes for a good solid addition into my music library of greatness. Whether you guys like the Police or not, or whether you hate Sting, you know, hey, dude, woohoo! All right, so Sting was number 14. Let's get on to number 13. Lucky number 13. Oh shit. You're gonna have to put up with it. DMB, how about that? The Dave Matthews Band. You either love them or you hate them, I guess. Well, I happen to love this band. It was a time, I guess I'm gonna say 94, when I decided on a whim to surf through MTV just to see if they were still playing music videos, because at that point, you know, drama. So anyway, they happened to play an hour block of videos in a row, and I wanted to get a feel of what the music of the day was, and being out of touch with the radio and all whatever's popular. So, and that whole hour went by with nothing but garbage except for a Dave Matthews Band song, and I thought, this is pretty neat. I went out and got the album. That album was Under the Table and Dreaming, and loved the album. Thought that this band was original, and they were different, and they had their own sound, and I was cool with all of it. I love the music, I love the lyrics, and been buying them ever since. Before These Crowded Streets is my favorite. I was in shock when I first listened to that album of just how bold and brilliant it is. My favorite song by Dave Matthews is Don't Drink the Water, which is on Before These Crowded Streets. And so that pretty much solidifies it for me. Dave's been kind of hit and miss, and he's not really a miss. He's more like a hit, and then and then a hit, and then so I'm hot and cold with them. They had cracked my top 10 when they did Before These Crowded Streets, but but they're hit and miss. I also really like Busted Stuff. I thought that album was really good. Those are my favorite. Under the Table and Dreaming, Before These Crowded Streets, Busted Stuff. So now I said my favorite song by them is Don't Drink the Water. I got to tell you my favorite song by all these artists too, and I haven't been doing that. So for Radiohead, ultimately my favorite song by them is Fake Plastic Trees. Jane's Addiction, my favorite song by them is Summertime Rolls. Brilliant. Sting, holy moly. My favorite song by Sting is Why Should I Cry For You? There's been different versions of that song, but I love every version. So there you go. Now we're getting to number 12. Number 12 is actually the most modern addition on my list. Radiohead's pretty modern. Dave Matthews is pretty modern if you want to talk about the 90s. But my number 12, and a shocker to me that anyone past the 90s would get on this list, St. Vincent. That's right. Annie Clark, St. Vincent, my favorite album, self-titled, from 2014. How did I discover St. Vincent? How the hell did that happen? All I know is that once I heard her, I had to get everything she'd ever done. So I don't remember exactly how I stumbled upon St. Vincent. I want to say I saw Marrow somehow. A video. God, it can't be it. Was it possibly not until 2014? It was definitely 2014 when I decided I'm buying all of her albums. It was probably something off of the self-titled album from 2014 that caught my attention. So maybe Get Back. Maybe that one. I don't know. But anyway, I ended up buying all 4 of the albums, her major releases. And really is a venture into the career of a woman. You know, the differences of each album are stark, and I'm just blown away by her ability to write music. Her lyrics are so good, they're so deep, but her ability to write music, pop music, and then just the way she does it was inspiring to me. I hadn't been inspired by a musician in a long time, and getting all of her albums and having that crash course, it's a thing I'll never forget. I mean, I love the woman. I could put on nothing but St. Vincent all day long and be completely happy. I'll drive everybody else crazy around me. My wife's like, yeah, my brother, you know, he probably digs her. I mean, I know he had a little love affair there for a minute, so he can admit to. But I'm a full-blown fanatic. Her last album, to me, was a little bit of a letdown, but I haven't really pounded it in my brain a lot. When she releases singles, they all grow on me, and so that particular album, the last one she did, just didn't hit me completely as an album, complete album. But as I ingest each part separately, I think the whole, I'll go back to the whole eagerly. But St. Vincent is there at number 12 for my old ass. Congratulations, Annie. All right, number 11. Now this is tough because the rest of these bands are just my all-time favorites. Bands that I've loved my whole life. Bands that no one will ever take away from me. And I don't know if how you guys are going to feel about this one or not, but number 11, maybe it's a guilty pleasure, but Erasure. Oh my God, Erasure. My favorite album by them, I can't really decide. I'm giving it to the Circus. But I also love their self-titled album, which came out years later. I love Chorus. I mean, The Innocents was one of them things that, you know, they finally got some notoriety with. Wild was so brilliant, and you know, and I had this high expectations for Erasure, so I got to give them credit for Wild, and then Chorus especially. Wow. Took me a while to get into the self-titled because they were using different sounds, and there was a little bit of a different strategy with that album, but I came to love it. And you know, different incarnations since then that they've taken a direction with the sound and the songwriting that's kind of more like a big pop. It's more like Barbra Streisand-y kind of now to me. And I don't know. That's not really a way to describe it. I don't know how to describe it. It's like something that Donna Summers or something would sing. You know, before it was new wave and kind of clung to that retro style, you know, Depeche Mode, Yaz style, and they ventured into something different. But I still love everything that they do, and seen them in concert. It was great. They're fun. Erasure is one of those bands that I think even jocks can like. At least a couple of songs by them, you know. So, but I'm a huge fan, which means I'm singing 50 freaking songs by them. All right, you just play every album, and I'm there. I love Vincent Clarke. He's one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to writing music. Ultimately, he's my favorite keyboard player, and it's only because the way he structured songs, pop songs, new wave songs, just did it for me, and I really was inspired. What he did was something I wanted to do. It was pleasant to me, and you know, when I started writing on the keyboard, I have to say, Erasure, and there's one other band that I'll mention later on the list. My biggest inspirations. Some of my better original songs are very similar to Erasure. I love them. I love Vincent Clarke, you know, early Depeche Mode, that's what he did. Then he started Yaz, did that, love every song they did. And then now he's with Erasure, who's, you know, I feel Erasure's better than Depeche Mode and Yaz, so I'm there. If you're a New Wave fan, I'm sorry, but Depeche Mode does not appear in my top 16. They're in my top 35, I'm sure. Not in my top 15, but Erasure is at number 11. I had a love affair with every album they came out with up until Cowboy. Didn't have a love affair with that one, but just brilliant to me. Wonderland, so awesome, and then The Circus, which is just full of nothing but hits and so well produced. You know, after that, when they came out with The Innocents, they became popular because a couple of the songs were being played on the radio. I try to discover. That one's still popular to this day. You know, Break the Chains of Love. That was the big video on MTV. They still never achieved, I don't even think, top 20 popularity here in America. But I love them. I love them to death. And when I listen to Erasure, I get to where I'm flailing everywhere. And I don't care what people think about it. I'm going to inject that right now. The man sings about his struggles, and I can relate to that drama and his ability to sing. I love Andy Bell's voice. He's one of my favorite singers. I think he just does it. He does it right. He pulls it off, and the other people can just wish they could sing like that. That's how I feel, you know. And he does a certain thing the way he does it. So, not my favorite voice or anything like that. He's just a brilliant singer, and the music, you know, very disco, techno. So I'm all over the place when I listen to them. My wife and I, that's one that her and I agree on. She loves Erasure. We have a good time listening to that. All right, but Erasure didn't make my top 10, and it's shocking because they are literally just a band I adore. But these other bands have been more consistent. This one might be a bit of a shocker, but at number 10, Coldplay. That's right. That's right, Coldplay. Much like the Dave Matthews Band, Coldplay is a band you either love or you hate. Coldplay is one of those bands that's the butt end of a joke. Okay? I fucking love Coldplay. I fucking love them. It didn't start off good. Okay? I thought Yellow was a silly song. Silly. You're singing about a color. Silly. And then I forgot all about them. And then one day, I was watching an award show, music award show, and the guy was introducing the band that was about to play. And he called them one of the greatest bands to ever hit the scene in England, I guess, in the last 20 years. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to check this out. And it was Coldplay, and they played Politic from Rush of Blood to the Head. And he was coming off the piano stool, banging those chords, those two chords over and over. And his voice was so unique, I thought he sung really well. I'm now thinking, okay, there's something to this band. So I'm going to have to check them out. Before I bought anything by them, I'm at work and Clocks plays on the radio. And I'm like, this is really cool, man. This is typical, right up my alley, new wave. You know, I like this. And I figured out it was Coldplay. I'm like, okay, well, I'm definitely going to have to check these guys out. So I got that album. And it was really good. I think The Scientist is one of those songs that is perfection. And went back and got everything they had. The original album, Parachutes, is just one of the greatest albums ever. And you know, I really love everything they released up until X and Y. It was okay. It was okay. It didn't blow me away, but Milo Zelato is an album that that blew me away from beginning to end. I couldn't believe how, I don't know, brazen they were to just let it all hang out with one pop song after another and just artistically done. And I don't know, to me, that album, there's a love affair I have with it. And my son, my youngest son, at the time, so that was 2011, so he was not even a year old, and he was identifying with these songs. The first thing he ever sung, he was humming, I believe, he was humming Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. Great memories with this, and to this day, my son will pick that album out of all the albums there and say he wants to listen to that one. He loves Paradise. He loves Hurts Like Heaven. He loves Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. It's a great album. I love it from beginning to end. Parachutes is great, but Milo Zelato is great. I liked most of the albums Coldplay came out with. I don't own all of them. I don't own the last one they released. I did buy Ghost Stories, and I came to really, really enjoy it. You know, they're expanding their horizons just enough where they're not losing me. And so I can say that's cool. But I'm giving them a top 10 spot because there's a library of songs there that are just great. And I mean, Erasure and Coldplay to me are neck and neck here. My favorite songs, I didn't say St. Vincent. My favorite song by her is Marrow. I really love that song. And Bring Me Your Loves by St. Vincent. Bring Me Your Loves is a song that I couldn't believe it when I heard it. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I listened to it again. I still couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what she was singing about. I couldn't believe the feeling of it. Bring Me Your Loves is a transcendental song. Bring Me Your Loves is a song that anybody in the history of music, if they were able to write that song and pull that song off, would and should be proud of it. That's how much I love that song. So Marrow is the song that if anyone out there had never heard of St. Vincent, I could probably play Marrow and catch most of them. Whatever they were into, catch most of them. That would be a good one. But Bring Me Your Loves, transcendental song to me. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe she did that. I couldn't believe she broke it up the way she did and pulled it off. It was just brilliant. Okay, Erasure. I don't have a favorite song by Erasure. That's not happening. I love all of them equally too much. Can't do it. Can't pick one. Victim of Love was my favorite Erasure song for the longest time. And then I started leaning towards Am I Right from Chorus. But I really can't pick a favorite song by them. And Coldplay, my favorite song is Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. And I love Sky Full of Stars. Wow, that's a great achievement, in my opinion. Love that song. All right, so there, you caught up on songs. We're going to number 9. If you guys haven't heard any of this stuff, check it out. You've definitely heard of Coldplay, but you've probably not heard of Ride. And Ride is number 9 on my list. Till I'm Nowhere, baby. Ride. If you've never heard Ride, do me a favor and take a ride with Ride. Okay, got it? Okay. Ride's a little band that formed in the, I want to say the 80s, but I didn't get their very first recordings. Nowhere was their first major label release that I noticed. My twin brother, fell in love with that album, swore by it, and I had heard bits and pieces from it, and I thought, well, this band is definitely different. There's a shoegazing quality to them, but more melodic and more of like a rock jam instead of just a sound. But when I heard Vapor Trail, by Ride, that's my favorite song by them. It's on Nowhere from 1990, my favorite album by them. That's my favorite song. That song was brilliant. That song is one that any alternative band that's ever existed could have written that song, and that would have been their best song. I felt that way about that song. It's a great song. Ride, that whole album, Nowhere, is it's a classic. It's one of them things. If you grew up in the 60s and 70s, and there's certain staples, and the White Album by the Beatles or something like that. Ride, Nowhere is a staple like that. Okay, it's an album that you have to have. You have to have it in your collection. If you have the greatest collection of music ever, you have to put that one in there. Okay, Ride didn't have very many albums. After Nowhere, they came out with Going Blank Again, and that is such a different album. It's more polished. It's more tightly produced. The songs are more accessible, and a little bit of a letdown for me. But I came to love that album. It's just too good to deny, and You know, upon reflection, it's a very, very strong album. Now, Riot, at the time, between Nowhere and Going Blank Again, were releasing these insane B-sides that were better than some of the songs on the albums. And so this little collection in 92, I think Going Blank, it was 91 or 92, or maybe 93. With all the B-sides, this is just a library of music that's dominant. I mean, not a bad song in the bunch. You know, they had an album before Nowhere that yeah, I like half the songs, and the other half I can take it or leave them. But between Nowhere and Going Blank Again, Ride will always be in my top 10 because those are just classics, and the way they did it, how they, in my opinion, grabbed this shoegazing genre and said, look, I'm the king. The rest of you guys fall in line. They're a different band. The way they write music, to me, it's their own genre. So check out Ride, check out Nowhere. Brilliant band. Like I said, my favorite song by them is Vapor Trail. Okay, we're going to number 8. The Stone Roses. That's right, Stone Roses. I don't know a word their lead singer is saying. I can sing every song right along with them as long as you don't ask me to tell you what the hell he's saying. Coco Shore Road, why don't do the hills for 15 days? I don't fucking know what he said, but it's groovy as fuck when John Squire comes in that guitar. And I'm like, whoa, this guy is something else. Okay, that's probably the first song I ever heard by them Fool's Gold. No, you know what it was actually? It was the big hit, I Want to Be Adored. I saw the video, I thought it was interesting. The song is definitely a new wave song. It stood out at the time from all the other alternative bands that were being featured on late night MTV. But Fool's Gold was definitely the second song I heard by him. And, you know, that's a dance classic right there, man. That's the way it is. So this self-titled album from the Stone Roses was their second album, I think. But it's one of the greatest albums of all time. It's in my top 5. Self-titled Stone Roses. Beginning to end, it is a school of music. It is to be compared to the Beatles and all the other classic rock bands that everybody loves so much. I don't have a lot of them in my list. Like I said, I'm an 80s kid. I had a love affair with that album, self-titled Stone Roses. There are some moments in that album where you hit pure ecstasy, and then the next song starts and you're like, oh, I was waiting for this one too. I remember once my buddies and I were going to New Orleans. We were going to see a band called the House of Love play. And we were so into this Stone Roses album, but that's what we were listening to on the way up there. And when we were getting out of the car, we realized we were going to see the House of Love and not the Stone Roses. And we were a little bummed out. And come to find out, the band had got a hold of Bad Acid, apparently, and they weren't playing anyway. They let us in to watch some local act play for a radio station. It wasn't Stone Roses. It wasn't even the House of Love. It was somebody else altogether. But the Stone Roses are, to me, immensely talented. John Squire is a brilliant guitar player. He's got a shtick, and he sticks to it. But I love it. It's funky. The drummer is very original, unique. he's playing his little bongos out. And as groovy as the lyrics are, the flow of them, you know, the melody of it, you know, I can forgive that I don't understand what the hell he's saying half the time, Ian Brown. I love that album. The Stone Roses' next album, as I recall, was Turns into Stone. I loved that album. Thought it was great. Then they took forever and a day and came out with Second Coming, which was a letdown because we waited too long. And by then, to me, Stone Roses and Turns into Stone solidifies them as one of the greatest bands ever. So I was a little let down with the third offering, but some of it grew on me after a while. Second Coming, some of it grew on me after a while. There's still some great funk in it, and it's worth having for sure. They've done something recently here, because that was pretty much it for them back in the day. They did something recently here, and I like it okay, but nothing jumped out at me. But like I said, Stone Roses original, or self-titled, and Turns into Stone, along with a lot of the B-sides they were releasing at that time, much like Ride, solidifies Stone Roses there at number 8. My favorite Stone Roses song, oh Jesus, I guess it would have to be I Am the Resurrection, because they do this jam at the end. It's just, I love that jam. I'm gonna stick with that one. All right, now we're getting to the cream of the crop, because I could have flip-flopped Ride and Stone Roses. I particularly like Stone Roses better than Ride. My twin brother will tell you Ride's better. Okay, but we're going to number 7. This is the other band that influenced me when playing music as much as Erasure. Number 7 on my list is New Order. My favorite album by New Order is Brotherhood from 1986. New Order. They used to be Joy Division. Then the lead singer passed away. Ian Curtis passed away. And New Order decided to keep on going. They let the guitar player, Bernard Sumner, do the singing, and they started to blend a little more of a techno thing going on, besides all the gloom and doom that a lot of Joy Division was. It was great. Joy Division to me was more gothic. New Order went through some phases. They started out as a really good alternative band, mixing some stuff in there with the keyboards, and then they started to incorporate dance beats a little bit more, and started leaning more heavily toward the keyboards, got away from the guitars a little bit, and they had a single called Blue Monday, which was the biggest selling 12-inch in England for the longest time. Brilliant song. It was redone, later on by some band. I don't remember. In New Order, he started to evolve into in later years, started to evolve into more of a discotheque. Every song a dance song, pop. And I still love the songs, I just didn't love them as much as that original essence gave me. My favorite album, Brotherhood, is it was kind of like a return to guitars for them, in my opinion, where guitars were featured just as heavily as the keyboards. And I think that was the epitome of the band, and I think that was the climax of the band for me, where they really brought it all together on that album for me, where it wasn't too dancey, techno-y. It had, some heavy guitar in it too. So I'm going to pick Brotherhood as my favorite album by New Order, only because their greatest hits album, the one that came out in '87, right after Brotherhood, was is called Substance, and that collection of songs by New Order, along with the second disc B-sides and alternate versions of stuff, that's the best album New Order's ever had. If you don't have anything by New Order, you go ahead and get Substance, and that'll give you a chronological order of their progression and some of their biggest hits. You know, up until the 90s, they still had a few albums later on. Regret was on Republic, and I didn't like Republic, but Regret's one of my favorite songs they've ever done. And then later on, they did a few other things. They did an album called No, and that was good, and I'm okay with it. It took a while, grows on me. Stuff that they've released recently, every song I like. You know, nothing that blows me away, but nothing that turns me away from them either. But New Order had a string there for a while, so I'm a huge fan of New Order. I love the way that they were able to break it all down, where they had guitar parts playing, keyboard parts going. All of them had to fit a certain way. They layered them, where you had the bass. The bass player would play these melodies on the high strings and repetitive melodies, and the guitar would start to do something repetitive. Keyboards always had 2 or 3 parts going on, and when all of them were going on at the same time, it's a loud fiasco. But what's brilliant about New Order is when they peel the parts away and they just feature one at a time, you know, it really dominates the feel of the song, dramatically changes it, gives it just something brilliantly melodic to follow. And then toward the end of every song, they start to layer these parts one after another, and I was enamored by that. It inspired me to write music. You know, I wanted to put parts together like that too, and that's really what motivated me to start writing a lot of music, wanting to put the parts together and make them fit. And 9 out of 10, it sounded a lot like New Order. It sounded a lot like Irregular. New Order is a great band. Most people don't like the sound of Bernard Sumner's voice. He's not the greatest vocalist in the world, I guess. I like his lyrics. They're interesting. And like I said, I love the way the music's layered. Pardon me 1 second. Okay. I don't really have a favorite album other than Substance, Brotherhood, and Technique. All of the earlier ones, Power, Corruption, Lies, stuff like that, were good. I can't guarantee that if you buy one of their earlier albums, you'd love the whole thing from beginning to end. Maybe you would if you like that more darker stuff, but they are an evolution, and it happens within every album, so they're all worth checking out. But I gotta put my finger on Brotherhood and Substance, and then Technique. I think that was the string right there that solidified them as one of my favorites. I saw them live when they toured for Technique, and yeah, those guys are great. My favorite song by New Order is probably Bizarre Love Triangle. I have too much of a love affair with that song to pick another one. I'll go with that one, Bizarre Love Triangle. New Order. All right. This is one of the oldest artists on my list at number 6. This is a little bit of classic rock here. I hadn't had a lot of it on this list, but my list does comprise mostly of European artists, if you haven't noticed. There's maybe 3 Americans in there: James Addiction, Dave Matthews, and he from America, and St. Vincent. Everybody else is Europeans. It's just the way I roll. I mean, that's what I'm a fan of. This is probably everybody's list. Pink Floyd. And my favorite album by Pink Floyd is The Wall. The Beatles are not on my list. Now, the Beatles are in my top 25, along with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. All three of them are in my top 25. None of them broke into my top 16. I consider the Beatles as probably the greatest band ever. I love what they did. I love how they affected music, and even in my old age, I'm still blown away by some of the stuff they wrote. So, impressive, but they're not on my list, okay? Pink Floyd is. I had more of a love affair with what Pink Floyd did. Dark Side of the Moon's probably everybody's favorite album by them, you know, unless you go way back and you want to be original and pick one of the older albums when Syd Barrett was with them. I didn't know anything about him. When I was 9, we had an 8-track tape of The Wall floating around, and you couldn't listen to any rock and roll station without hearing Pink Floyd, and that's where most of my initial Pink Floyd exposure came, hearing Another Brick in the Wall. But then the next hour they'd play Hey You, and then the next hour they'd play Mother, you know, and then the next hour they'd play every song off of Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, I was a fan of metal. I thought that album was great. You know, the whole second half is echoes, and that's okay, but that's a brilliant, you know, thing, a band achievement. And some people like to put that opera together, and that's the one that they did. But they've done a lot of experimental stuff, and I'm okay with it. But they're great rock songs, you know, in the 70s. That was the time when they solidified themselves as a great band, and even though I was familiar with a lot of it, it wasn't until I was 19, 20 years old that I really fell in love with them. I mean, probably metal, probably one of these days kicking in, and revisiting The Wall. I had seen the movie, I had heard the album, like I said, the 8-track was laying around, but that's a deep album. And the older you get, the more you can relate to what the character's going through, and it begins to make sense. And, you know, most people are like, hey, drop acid, watch The Wall. I didn't get anything out of dropping acid and watching The Wall. I got more out of The Wall from living life, experiencing life, and then going back to The Wall and listening to it and understanding, you know, feeling it, making it connect more for me. And The Wall will always be my favorite album by Pink Floyd. Nothing's ever going to take its place, especially this last couple of things they released. I mean, they were all good, but you might as well have called them Pink Gilmore. Roger Waters was such a good integral part of it. I love Gilmore's guitar. It defines the 70s, but Roger Waters and his lyrics, his sentiment, and what he brought, you know, that's really Pink Floyd. I saw Pink Floyd after Waters left. I saw them in New Orleans. They toured for Pulse. Was that the name of the Division Bell? And it was great, I must say. The second half of the concert was the entire Dark Side of the Moon album from beginning to end. But my favorite album by them is The Wall. I love everything they did in the 70s. My wife thinks I'm crazy because I have them ranked above New Order. My wife's a big New Order fan. But I don't listen to much Pink Floyd. I really don't. And my wife doesn't like it, so I don't listen to them a lot. I've had time to listen to them. I've absorbed it. And when I revisit it, it's awesome every time. I just have to do it when she's not around. Okay, now we're getting to my top 5. This is a little sick. Number 5. The Cure. Cure. I can pop it up a little bit now. It's cold between days. Woo. The Cure. Now, they were my favorite band forever and a day. You know, when I fell in love with The Cure, I fell in love with them hard. They were the best fucking band. Nobody else could even touch them. The Cure was the shit, and that was it. My favorite album by them is Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, but it didn't fucking matter. Every fucking album was great. It seems to me like as though I was along for the fucking ride with The Cure. You know, I had to jump someone else's train that introduced me to The Cure. But once I got introduced to The Cure, I went back and started, and that was it. Every fucking album, you know, 17 Seconds, every fucking album. We had to have it. Fire in Cairo. We're going to... Three Imaginary Boys, son of a bitch, you know? Then Primary, and oh my God. Then they got all dark with Pornography. Oh my God. That album's so depressing they broke up. And then Robert Smith and the keyboard player were like, hey, you know what? Let's just keep making music under The Cure. They did an album, a couple of things, Japanese Whispers and something else. But man, those songs were great. And all they were doing was just pounding shit away. Them two, you know, the drummer decided to play the keyboards. Smith played a little keyboard. He kept playing the guitar. He just started playing the bass lines. And them two chugged out fucking, let's go to bed. You know, and oh, just great. Then they got a few other band members to join in a little bit. They did the little things. I love Cats, man. It's such a good song. And then, oh my God. And then the old band got back together again. And it was like, oh gosh, what are they going to do? And son of a bitch, if they didn't fucking do The Head on the Door. Oh my God, that is one of the greatest albums ever. The Head on the Door. It's like, okay, this is new wave pop music the way it's meant to be done. Wow, such a good album. Does it get any better than this? Then they came out with their greatest hits album, Standing on the Beach. That's the album to get if you don't like The Cure, if you never own The Cure, maybe you never really listened to The Cure. Go ahead and get Standing on the Beach, because that's a great collection of everything he did from the late 70s through the 80s. And then you get to 1987, which is Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. And Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, from beginning to end, is the perfect album. It's a little slow and dark at times, but they pop it up real good with a couple of entries. There's some songs on there that's just the greatest efforts they've ever made. Just the best pop singles ever. Just Like Heaven was a big radio hit for them. Probably not a top 20, but it was a radio hit in America. Just Like Heaven is a perfect song. That's, to me, that's the way you write a song. You know, you introduce the different parts, you build it up. You give them everybody what they hear. You sing it first. You give them a little change. Bust into the original part. Play a nice little solo. Bust back into the lyrics. Finish that motherfucker off. Just Like Heaven, man. A perfect song. They've always written perfect songs in between days. A Forest. I mean, you just go back. Jump in someone else's train. Boys Don't Cry. We can go on and on and on, man. The Cure is the shit. But Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me is an album that, to me, it's just like, okay, this is the best a band can get. The songs are all original. They're all artistic efforts, you know, striving to do something different. The biggest, poppiest song on there is Why Can't I Be You? And the first time I heard that song, I lost my shit, man, because I like big pop songs with horns. You know, when David Bowie did Modern Love, I fucking loved it. Modern Love, welcome back. Even when Peter Gabriel did Sledgehammer, I'm like, I'm fine with this. Bring in the horns. Why not, man? Sure. You know, by then I had accepted Sting and what he did with Nothing Like the Sun. So I thought that Why Can't I Be You was just phenomenal. One of my favorite songs they've ever done. I don't know what my favorite song is by The Cure. I really don't. My favorite song by Pink Floyd, son of a bitch, man. I don't have a favorite song by Pink Floyd. That's one that I can't pick. I really can't. It's just impossible. I'm not even going to try that. I'm not even going to utter. I'll just listen to The Wall. You'll have a bunch of them there. The Cure, oh Jesus, maybe it is Why Can't I Be You? Maybe it is. I have a love affair with that song, man. That pop genius thing, golly. I love The Cure. And I loved them straight into the 90s. Wish came out, and I thought, well, I wish some of this album didn't sound like it does. And then they did some stuff after that I probably didn't pay attention to. There was a big gap there, but they, they've done a lot of things. Blood Flowers, everything I've heard from that was good, and so I saw them not too long ago. I saw them twice. I saw them in 1988 for Disintegration, and then I saw them again in 2008. And they were a four-piece, no keyboards, and it didn't matter. And then Old Men played for 2.5 hours, no lie. They played 40 songs at least, and it could have been a greatest hits concert, and it was just amazing, and probably a better concert than the one I saw 30 years earlier, or 20 years, 30 years, 88, and 20 years later. So, love The Cure. They're always going to be one of my favorites. They're number 5. Number 4, Peter Gabriel. His album Passion, of course, my favorite album ever. Peter Gabriel's a strange cat. I think his first 4 solo albums were untitled. So that's weird. And he had left Genesis as the lead singer of Genesis, and a couple of years went by, and then he started releasing all these solo albums. And parts of it was still that 70s prog rock / rock that could have infected the entire band. Genesis, and it didn't, and it could have infected Gabriel as well. And he had different songs in each of those first 4 albums that proved to me that he wasn't just a one-note thing, besides all the brilliance from Genesis when he was in Genesis. But it wasn't until he did So, and Daniel Lanois produced So. When that happened, I realized that Gabriel was able to achieve these moments in music that no other musician can. And it really was brought through with Daniel Lanois' production, who I think is one of the most brilliant producers out there. Mesha. So is one of those albums that not only was it critically acclaimed, not only was it highly successful for top 5 hits all around the globe, it proved to me what kind of an artist he was. There's a song on that album called Mercy Street. And when I first heard Mercy Street, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what I was listening to. I didn't know if that was a keyboard part or if somebody was playing little chimes and playing some kind of whistle or a bell. I didn't know what I was listening to. Just to this day, when that song starts, it's just a brilliant thing, and it really reminds me of a lot of what he did in Passion. But you had the big pop hits from that album too, and that album from beginning to end, So, is one of the greatest things ever. And then the album he did right after is my favorite. It was called Us. And that was also produced by Daniel Lanois, and it wasn't recognized as heavily as So, and kind of bothered me because I thought it was a better album overall. Us is an album of true artistic accomplishment, to go deep into this different songs, different tracks that are arranged in a way that you can put your finger on it, each song, and be like, he does something here that's completely unique from other musicians, and makes the song unique, and at the same time the beauty of all of it shines through. Sinead O'Connor sings in a couple of the tracks, and Us is my favorite album he's ever done, and So's pretty damn good too. I'm talking about straight pop album, because Passion is my favorite album of all time. Now that's more of an instrumental kind of album. But Peter Gabriel, you know, a little hit and miss when some of the pop songs he does kind of annoy me. I'm not gonna lie, but they grow on me. Son of a bitch, do they grow on me? And he's done a lot of collaborations with a lot of people I don't know, and they all seem to grow on me. But I give Gabriel number 4, and he's going to have to take a back seat to his fellow Genesis band member, who's my number 3, Phil Collins. I know another butt end of a joke, right? Man, this guy right here with his Dave Matthews Band and his Coldplay is going to pull out Phil Collins. First of all, my favorite song by Peter Gabriel is God, what's the name of it? Son of a bitch. In the Blood of Eden. The Blood of Eden. So check that song out. That's my favorite song he's ever done. It's a regular song. It's got singing in it and stuff, you know. So, all right. So let's talk about the man Pete took a back seat to, Phil Collins. Okay, my childhood. That's basically it. When In the Air Tonight came out in 1980, I thought it was pretty fucking annoying that they played it every goddamn half hour, and they wouldn't stop fucking playing it over and over and over and over and over again. I was 9 at the time, but as I grew up, you know, every year there'd either be an old Genesis song or a Phil Collins single, and I always liked it. And then I got into middle school. His second album was Hello, I Must Be Going, and there's a song on there that kicks the album off called I Don't Care Anymore. And that song I identified with, because I was a bit of a outcast at school and didn't have any friends. I was more of a nerd before I became a freak. But I Don't Care Anymore did something for me, and that was what In the Air Tonight had done to a lot of other people. I Don't Care Anymore did for me. And Phil never stopped with the hits. It never stopped, you know. And if he wasn't doing a great album with Genesis, topping the charts, he was topping the charts himself. His third album was No Jacket Required, and that was like big award winner, and every song was a top 5 hit, number 1. Phil, everything Phil touches turns to gold, right? He's a pop artist, but you go back to his days with Genesis, and you realize everything that he does with the music that he produces as a solo artist. You realize how brilliant of a drummer he is. My favorite drummer of all time, of course. Peter Gabriel has my favorite voice of all time, and Ray Charles. Ray Charles wasn't in Genesis, but Peter Gabriel has one of the greatest voices ever. I also love Chris Martin from Coldplay. Love his voice. But Phil Collins, to me, wrote the best melodies of the lyrics. And Phil did that a lot with Genesis. He would just hum a little melody along with the chorus progression and chord progression, and then before you know it, he'd find some words that would fit in there. Phil is a love song writer. He has this sappy sentiment about his music, and I am a sap. So his lyrics touch me, and all of his romantic songs are exactly that. Yes, even Against All Odds. Take a look at me now. It is the butt of a joke, but it is a goddamn good song. And Phil can do no wrong. I mean, every album he ever did, no matter how much I resisted it, shit would grow on me. It would eventually grow on me. He did this one album called Both Sides. He basically, was it Both Sides? Yeah. And he basically did the whole thing in his bedroom by himself. And it's just awesome. It's just beautiful. And it took a while. I had to get used to the lack of production. And then before you know it, I'm singing every damn song. I love Phil Collins. I love his melodies. I love the way he plays the drums. I love that he can write these Motown pop songs in the 80s and 90s and get away with it. And, you know, his popularity is undeniable. Perhaps a guilty pleasure for me, but I don't care anymore. I can sing every song that man's ever done, probably from beginning to end. I am a wild fan of his. His first 4 albums were like the Bibles to me. Played that forever. That was my 80s right there. And I would make a distinct difference between Phil Collins and Genesis. There is a difference, a big difference. I used to get annoyed when Genesis would come on and people would go, oh, it's Phil Collins. It's not fucking Phil Collins, it's Genesis. There's a big difference. And there's a big difference within Genesis. But before I get to Genesis, spoiler alert, my number 2 favorite band of all time, The Smiths. And I had a hell of a time picking my favorite album by The Smiths. You know, if you're a diehard Smiths fan, their original self-titled album, you know, can't go wrong with that one. Meet His Murder comes out, and it's just the most brilliant thing ever. And I had a love affair with Meet His Murder way after the fact. So Meet His Murder is up there with me as my favorite album. I really literally had to choose between Louder Than Bombs and Meet His Murder. Even though the next album, the third album, The Queen Is Dead, is probably regarded by most as their greatest album. That thing is just a fucking album brilliance. Okay, now they did a few things like A Hat Full of Hollows and stuff, but I'm in America. So the next thing that was released was Louder Than Bombs. It was like this double LP with like 30 songs on it, and it was pretty much all the albums they had released in England that we hadn't gotten. And to me, Louder Than Bombs is the way to go. The brilliance on that album, I mean, the chord progressions. The Johnny Marr is just the man. I said Vincent Clarke's my favorite keyboard player. Johnny Marr is my favorite guitar player, bar none. Bar none. If I gave props to any other guitar player, Johnny Marr is the man, bar none. The way he layers guitar parts, and you really got to get into it and listen to it. The attention to detail he pays, much like the Beatles, these chords that I've never heard before, you know, and just subtle way to take this chord from here to here with this this inclusion of this beautiful, brilliant chord, which I immediately register as he's better than the rest of them because he did that. That's just the way it is. So, and Johnny, you know, technically the way he plays, it's, you know, he's not a heavy metal shredder. He's really an anti-guitar hero. But it's beautiful. The most beautiful thing. The guitar god is what he is. And the Smiths' lead singer, Morrissey, he can get in some hot water sometimes. He is my favorite lyricist of all time. Love Perry Farrell, love Roger Waters, but my favorite lyricist is Morrissey. Okay, no offense here, but I'm going to try to break it down. He came across as a homosexual, atheist, vegetarian man who was celibate. That's what I got from all of his songs. That's a complicated place to come from, and it went across on me. I mean, the choice of lyrics, the way he arranged the words. You know, people listen to the Smiths, and the first thing they hear is Morrissey's voice, and they either, or they hate it. Most people can't stand it, and they won't give the band a chance. Now, you listen to most Smith songs, and after a while, Morrissey stops singing, and you hear just the music. That's what I love about the Smiths. I mean, almost every song, the end of every song, you get to hear the music without Morrissey. And that's when it really hits you at how brilliant this thing is. But the fact that Morrissey's voice is so bad, and it sounds semi-melodic, it all goes to the songwriting of the Smiths and Johnny Marr, and the way he layered those guitars. And the bass and the drums are all on point, solid, and that takes some skill, possibly some cocaine or something, I don't know. But Johnny Marr is my favorite guitar player, and Morrissey is my favorite lyricist. Now, truth be told, every band that I've mentioned so far has had a song that I didn't like. And even my number one band has had plenty of songs I didn't like. The Smiths have never had a song that I didn't love. Never. And it was a hard love affair to come by. I heard Please, 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 Let Me Get What I Want on the Pretty in Pink soundtrack. And I thought, that's the worst song on the whole album. We can skip that song. I don't want to hear it. Because I heard Morrissey's voice and I thought, okay, goofy. Didn't like it. After a while, there's this accordion solo at the end, and that was always so pretty. And so I decided to just ignore his voice and just listen to the music. And I mean, I was blown away by the chord progression, and I thought, wow, The lyrics were okay, guy's moping. Sounds like he never had anything and wants something. Ducky wishing he could hook up with Alex, but is that her name? Molly Ringwald. Anyway, oh, I'm cracking up. I don't know what song did it for me after my disappointment with Please, Please, Please. But now Please, Please, Please is one of my all-time favorite songs. It really is. I didn't give you my favorite song for Phil Collins. Favorite song for Phil Collins is You Know What I Mean. And that's on Face Value. My favorite song by the Smiths is off of The Queen is Dead, and it's called There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. But it's really tough for me to pick my favorite Smiths song because, like I said, every fucking song is good. The Smiths had a very short career. They did, after Queen is Dead, they did We Got Louder Than Bombs, and then the final album, Strange Ways, Here We Come, which was probably my least favorite album upon first listening. But most people will hate me for saying this, but my least favorite album by the Smiths is the first one they did. Was the original self-titled. I even like Strange Ways better than that one. And then I would have to say The Queen is Dead, and then Meat is Murder, and then Louder Than Bombs. And I love all three of them the same, pretty much. So the Smiths are my second all-time favorite band, and you got to give it up for the Smiths because they managed to break up what was dominating my top four. Number one, Genesis. Peter Gabriel was number 4 on my list. Phil Collins was number 3. Both of them prominent members of Genesis. The greatest band of all time, in my opinion. They could do no wrong. Every musician so good on their instrument, it was like they were masturbating. They could play whatever they wanted. They did what they wanted to do. They timed it however they wanted to. It didn't matter. And even when they had inconsistencies and flaws, they managed to bounce back. So Genesis starts with Peter Gabriel and Tony Banks. Tony Banks, keyboard player. And they're friends at school. And a couple other boys, Anthony Phillips and Michael Rutherford. They were friends. They had a band together. Gabriel and Banks had a band together, and then they decided to put their bands together and make a band. Somebody else called them Genesis. They threw some tracks together. It got thrown together. Band was called Genesis. The first album was called From Genesis to Revelations. Except the band name didn't stand out on the album. So when you look at the album, it just says From Genesis to Revelations, and nobody was going to buy that shit unless you're a Bible thumper. So the second album comes out with a major studio release called Trespass. And they didn't have a drummer in the band, but they had some guy play drums for them. And very experimental music, ultimate progressive rock. And they decided they needed to get a live set together because their music was so adventurous that it would just suit as a viewing experience to be played on a stage. So they had to get a drummer, so they went and got this guy, Phil Collins. And 1971 comes out with Nursery Crime, which has my favorite song by Genesis of all time, The Musical Box, which is the opening song. It's the first time you ever hear Phil Collins, first album he ever plays the drums. He's singing background as soon as the first song kicks off, Musical Box. Great stuff. Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, singing together, playing all this wild, adventurous music. That was 1971. 1972, they released Foxtrot, another album full of great experimental music. By the time they did Nursery Crime, not only did they get Phil Collins, they also got Steve Hackett to play guitar, so Michael Rutherford. Anthony Phillips was the guitar player before. He left after the first major studio album, and Michael Rutherford continued to play the bass. Steve Hackett started playing guitar. Phil was the great backup singer, drummer, and Pete was the lead singer, and changed costumes and would have this theatrical presentation. Then 1973 came, Selling England by the Pound. That's my favorite Genesis album. If I have to pick one, I'm going to pick it from back then and there. And Peter Gabriel, Steve Hackett, Phil Collins, Michael Rutherford, Tony Banks. Just the greatest band. Selling England by the Pound has an experimental song on it that I'm not too fond of. The Battle of Epping Forest. But other than that, the album's impeccable and brilliant. That was 1973. 1974 was The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. This is a double album. And they started playing the States, even though they couldn't sell out a stadium. It's just that they were just a sight to behold. And at this point, Peter Gabriel's wearing costumes that are just so brilliant and fantastical. It's like a theater show. And he couldn't get the mic to his mouth to sing because the costume would get in the way. But anyway, I think Peter Gabriel's son got sick after that, or child, and they decided, instead of making all these plans of touring and everything else and trying to come up with a new album, Peter was just going to leave the band. And that was when the band almost broke up. But they didn't. Within a 2-year period, the 4 remaining members decided to put some music together. They came out with 2 albums in '76. One of them was called oh shoot, I'm gonna forget. Wind and Wuthering, and the other one was called A Trick of the Tail. The Trick of the Tail is one of my favorite albums they've ever done. That was brilliant. Steve Hackett did a lot of contributing to that one, and a really good album, so fucking good. But then Steve Hackett left the band. And then in 1978, they decided, well, fuck it, we'll just release a trio. And then there were three. And with just Phil Collins, Michael Rutherford, and Tony Banks writing songs, Phil got a chance to influence a lot of what was happening. And a love song came out of that called Follow You, Follow Me, and that was their biggest hit up to that point. Then they decided, well, we'll let Phil write his own song. You know, we'll play one of his songs. So the next album, Duke, in 1980, Phil wrote a song, and they all did it as Genesis, and it was called Misunderstanding, and that was probably what propelled them into classic rock stardom. Misunderstanding was a big pop hit. At this point, they're a middle-aged band, but you know what? They were perfecting their style as a trio. And then Phil Collins released, in that same year, 1980, released his first solo album, and he became this major success. So every subsequent album after that by Genesis rode the coattails of Phil Collins' solo success, and Genesis became hugely successful after that. 1981, they did Abacab. 1983, they did Mama. Self-titled, really. And 1987 was Invisible Touch. 1986, pardon me, Invisible Touch. Every song that was released off that album was a top 5 hit for sure. They were darlings on MTV all the time. Had some experimental videos. And after Peter left the band, nobody else dressed up in costumes. Instead, they started using a lot of lights for their shows. They used to go back and forth in the late 70s and 80s. If Pink Floyd toured that year, they had the biggest light show of any band. But if they didn't tour, Genesis would take that. They have great lighting in their concerts. If you ever get a chance to watch any of them, they had one other wildly successful album in the early 90s called We Can't Dance. And then after that, they called it Quits. They got another lead singer without Phil Collins and did another album, but I don't count that one. I just gave you the entire fucking history of Genesis, but that's all I'm going to say about them. That's everything you needed to know. That's it. My favorite 16 artists and albums. Took me an hour and a half, but I finished it. Hopefully you guys will take some of these bands I've mentioned and check them out if you haven't. Seriously consider them if you haven't. And now you know a hell of a lot more about me. And I'm going to bed. I'm Joe. This has been Twin Perspective Artists and Albums. My favorite artists and songs and albums from all of them. Those are my favorites. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And I'll see you in the trees. Bye.